This is the High Impact Leadership Podcast.
Bringing vision into action.
Josh Vanada is a leadership and business growth coach.
I decided that I wanted to have a bigger impact.
Fueled by helping individuals and organizations thrive.
Engaged with a new passion.
Josh is a proven business leader.
To help others succeed.
Over 15 years experience in helping organizations put vision into action.
Where we provide tools and wisdom that help leaders and their organizations to thrive.
Strategy. Consistent execution. Leadership.
That's what coaching actually is. It's an unlocking of what's already there.
This is the High Impact Leadership Podcast.
Well, welcome back to another episode of High Impact, a podcast for leaders. Today, my guest is Bishop Andrew Williams. Drew Williams began his professional career as a corporate litigator in the UK from 1989 through 1998. But despite his successful career, it was during this time that he began to sense that something significant was missing in his life. Much to the surprise of his wife and they found themselves drawn into something far deeper and ultimately came to a living faith in God through the love, support, and friendship of their Anglican parish. A time of discernment followed, and after much prayer and strong encouragement from those who knew him, he resigned from his law firm and began training for ordination at Trinity College in Bristol. He graduated with an honors degree in theology and was ordained to the Diocese of Exeter in 2000, after which he spent 6 years as associate vicar at St. Andrew's in Chorleywood, a vibrant suburban congregation just outside of London. Prior to arriving at Chorleywood, he served a congregation in the southwest of England. And beginning in 2009, Bishop Andrew served as the senior pastor of Trinity Church in Greenwich, Connecticut, with areas of focus in developing and overseeing missional communities and ultimately multi-site congregations. His life passion is to graciously lead the churched, unchurched, and dechurched back to the reality of who Jesus truly is and the profundity of his love, grace, and mercy for them. That our identity might steadfastly rest upon God's relentless, tender, and compassionate love. On January 10th, 2019, the Anglican Church in North America's College of Bishops consented to the election of the Right Reverend Andrew Williams as the next bishop to oversee the Anglican Diocese of New England, and Bishop Andrew was consecrated in that role on March the 16th, 2019. So Bishop Andrew, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So what you may not know after that introduction is Drew is an incredibly gifted leader at helping to put vision into action. And that's why I invited him to the podcast. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's start a little bit with vision. I think that's often misunderstood. For a lot of organizations, they think that their vision is just to make massive amounts of money, which might be the byproduct of their vision, but it isn't in and of itself a vision. Some others might think it's just merely being the best. I got to be the best. As opposed to figuring out how you can be unique. But vision is more purposeful and aspirational than that. And this is something you understand well. So talk a bit about how you've discerned vision in the multiple roles that you have served in.
Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, you've been very generous. I mean, I would say that my natural kind of raw kind of leadership style kind of back in the day was much more intuitive, and I'm very grateful to a lot of people who've kind of leaned in and taught me a lot, and a lot of that's come from the business world, and I had a lot of that in London, and then coming to work in Greenwich, Connecticut, you can imagine that there were a lot of people who knew how to get the job done in Greenwich, Connecticut. So I just kind of want to say that as an encouragement to anybody who feels, this isn't really my thing. I'm more of a thinker or this or that, because I think you can learn these skills. I mean, I'm so grateful to you. I feel I've learned an awful lot from you. So, but in terms of vision, I mean, I think if you have an organization that's never actually thought about vision, I think you've actually got to start by telling them what the vision is. I actually think you actually have to kind of educate on, okay, as an organization, we are going to focus on, what is this mental image, that we're headed to? What does it actually look like? Where are we headed? And I think it should be inspirational. I think it should be aspirational. I think it should be challenging. And I think all of that kind of needs to be put out there. This is what we're going to discern together. And when I say together, I'll kind of break down what I mean by that. I think if you're the CEO, the primary leader, whatever that position is in your organization, you can't shirk the responsibility of actually really wrestling with this on your own. And I would encourage anybody to take to have the discipline to take some time out of your calendar and go and do this. Sit with a notepad. And I think it's got to be for you, like what where do you really want to be? What does success look like for you? What would you look back on in the next, say, 5 years? I mean, I know you and I always talk about how many years do we look ahead, whether it's 2 years or 5 years, but whatever that period is, and I think 2 is actually a better number. But what would be like, yeah, we made it, and this is good. This is life-giving. This is worth this investment of time and energy and so forth. So sit with that and come up with your best thinking, but don't think as the leader that you have to have it all nailed down. Because I think, first of all, I think a gear change in my leadership was to recognize that I think there was a season when I felt overly responsible to have all the answers. And the gear shift came on. I suddenly realized, hang on a minute, there's a better answer if I get the right people in the room. And I may have some strong feelings and a strong conviction, but let's lay that before people who you also want to bring into a sense of, aspirational, inspirational, where are we headed, vision casting kind of thing. So I would then, having spent that time on your own, I'd then bring it to a senior team. And that may be just 2 or 3 people that you really trust, that you can bounce the kind of wild ideas, you can be absolutely honest and get their feedback, get their buy-in, get their refinement. And I think when you have that kind of chorus with you, that's a really good place to then go to a slightly wider leadership team. And again, go put something real, substantive on the table, but invite feedback. Because I think at that point, what you should have is a whole, you've got a larger group of leaders that now feel bought in right from the get-go. So when the vision is then cast for the wider organization, and that may even be, I think that would include your client base. I think that would include the people that you're seeking to serve with your vision. When you actually get to push the button and say, this is why we exist, this is what we're going to accomplish. There's a much greater sense of buy-in than if I just come down from the mountaintop and say, here it is.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't start this process by bringing, your wider leaders together and it being like a committee kind of thing. I think that would be a disaster. I do think you have a responsibility as the CEO or the senior leader, whatever, however that translates in your organization. But I think then you kind of broaden it out, build consensus, refine, and then when you're ready, push the button.
I think that what I like about that refining piece is like it's a combination of saying, okay, this is where we're headed as the leader generally, but the refining comes in making sure it's understood. I know it being in some of these meetings before and working with clients, a leader might say, this is what I'm saying, here's where I'm at, here's the general area where I am. And then what ends up happening is the person asks some really thoughtful and reflective questions, and it actually plumbs even a little bit deeper, and there's more that's found there, and there's more clarity that comes out of that. So I think that iterative process is really helpful, and that tension that you described of saying, this is the general direction we're going, and I'm inviting feedback in that way does help to both create buy-in, but it also refines the original idea.
It does. And I think a byproduct of that, which is an important part, I think, in any organization, is that you start to build vocabulary, a shared vocabulary. I mean, everybody has it. I mean, I'm in the business I'm in, but in one sense, everybody has their own kind of liturgy. So, but I do think this process actually builds, we actually really get to understand together what we really mean. It's easy for me to say something and someone over here to think they've understood me, but we haven't teased it out. But vocabulary can be, because the great thing about vocabulary is that you can then begin to say things much more quickly because everybody knows what we mean when we say that. But that's a process. So I think that's a great byproduct of this kind of vision building strategy?
A great question that I usually bring to my clients actually comes from a theologian. His name is Buechner, and he asked people, figure out the place where your greatest passion meets the world's greatest need.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
I think it's such a great vocational question when you're thinking about vision, because it's something that's inspiring. Vision isn't about, well, we want to sell 35 million whatevers. Vision is, we want to change the world by.
Exactly. No, that thing exactly. And actually, I remember quite a few years ago now coming across, I hope I'm remembering this right, but it was a Japanese insurance company that did a lot of research in this area. And what they discerned was that actually building a culture where people felt good about changing the world, actually serving the world, and making, bringing benefit to people's lives was a much bigger incentivizer than actually paying them more money. So I'm not saying be cheap, but I'm just saying that whole to build this aspirational vision is a great way of, again, kind of creating loyalty and commitment. And people want to be part of something that's significant. That not many people want to show up and just push a few buttons and go home. Most people really do want to do something that they can feel that was a worthwhile. I'm making a worthwhile contribution.
Yeah, I mean, your life's work is helping people, right, to see that and to find purpose in their lives.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess if I look at I've got about 175 leaders up and down New England, and many of them could be doing all kinds of other things, but they are passionate and they believe rightly that they are making a difference in their communities, and they're drawing other people into that. And that's a great mobilizer, if you like, great incentivizer.
It is. So one of the things that I think you are well above average at, that is missed often, is continually casting vision.
Yeah.
You're gifted at going around when you're visiting the 175 leaders that you just referenced up and down New England, and keeping them aligned, and also finding stories to celebrate. So that, I imagine that's maybe that came naturally to you. It doesn't come naturally to most. How do you stay on the lookout for these types of things? And what are some tips you give listeners to be on the lookout to celebrate those types of really visionary moments?
I think you picked on some key language there. I think, and I remember someone saying this to me years ago. So this isn't original to me. But I have seen this. I saw this in London. I mean, in a sense, I've done this on two continents. I've done this in the UK, and I've done this in the States, and I've taught all over Europe with this as well. So you have to celebrate what you want to propagate. You have to, and I think actually that causes us, if you tend to be a glass is half empty kind of person, which is, there's some merits in that can be really helpful. But I think you need to find someone whose the glass is half full. I think you need to kind of delegate that piece, because I think what we have to do is to find those stories, and paint pictures for people of what success looks like. Here is here is an example of our vision being put into action. Here's this story where someone goes the extra mile, and here's the fruit. And I also think that in this, what you'll find is that I'm a great believer that there's an awful lot of expertise at kind of a grassroots level in any organization.
Yeah.
And I think in teasing out those stories, you bring again more and more people into this vision. It's kind of like if you're at the front here heading the way and you're casting the vision, there's your leadership team, just behind you and so forth. Everybody else, within this vision is kind of in this part. Sorry, this is not a piece of paper, but that's kind of driving forward. And I think you got to pay attention to what's going on in the triangle as you're moving forward, and pull out those stories, and I think that's good communication. I think that's, if you have a corporate newsletter or some kind of digital, or whether you're just posting stuff, I don't know, whether there's a Facebook, whatever it is, get it out there, and make it personal. I mean, literally, the person who discovered this kind of neat little way of delivering on the vision. Ask them, how did that feel? Where did they come up with that? How was that received? Actually get some live quotes. Photographs are good, and with phones you can photograph anything. One photograph tells 1,000 pictures, so 1,000 words. So I think I think you need to build a culture where you are continually celebrating what you want to propagate, because that gives you the excuse to cast the vision again. You can say, hey, this is the vision and this is that in action. Hey, isn't that amazing? And look at the rewards, and look at how life-giving this is for this person who's kind of gone the extra mile or found this way to deliver on the vision. So and I think in that sense, you need to build a culture that says we are actually making progress, because the vision needs to be aspirational and in one sense a bit beyond us. I think it needs to be like, whoa, this is bold. I hope we make it. If it's too easy, I mean, it's just like, whatever, But
right.
but I think if it has that kind of aspirational kind of lift off, then it's incumbent upon, I think, a strong leader and his team to actually say, we are winning. Might be slowly, and but we're winning. And here's a great example. And the other thing is, I think that when people see what as a company is being celebrated, they want in on that. They just naturally want to be a part of the good news. You just do. And you read something and you go, hey, well, we did this last week. I mean, I'm gonna call, blah, blah, blah. And then you've got another story. So I ask lots of questions. I'm just listening all the time for where I'm seeing the vision actually being put into action. And I'm quite unscrupulous in that sense. I'll say, hey, that's awesome. Can we talk about that? Would you mind if we put that out there? And people generally are really happy, are very keen. They're very pleased to actually share some good news.
They are. And the beauty of that is, Pat Lencioni refers to one of leaders' primary responsibilities as being the chief reminding officer.
Yeah.
The things that you're talking about, of seeking out these good stories, asking for permission to share them, finding ways, whether it be in newsletters, in your digital media platforms. Something you're really good at is when your organization has events, diocesan events, you'll actually highlight leaders who are putting the vision into action and have a period of time where there's a Q&A that can be done with them. And the beauty of that is somebody sitting in the seats listening to that goes, hey, that's one of my peers. They're pretty approachable. And so while somebody may not want to come and talk directly to you as their leader about an issue they're having, they might talk about the person who just went up and said, hey, 2 years ago, we were having this particular issue. A team and I got together and we addressed it. And now they can go and approach them.
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I do. And I think in that sense, it's amazing. It's amazing how just building a culture of honor in that sense. It doesn't have to be a great big item on your budget line, but just something that says, hey, we see you, we're really grateful, great work. And finding an opportunity to just kind of honor that. I think that goes an awful long way.
Absolutely. And Jack Welch was a legendary CEO of GE. And he used to say there are, the monetary rewards that I think we often gravitate towards, especially in the States. And then there are the rewards of the soul.
Yeah.
And things like what you're talking about in honoring, time to go and spend with loved ones, things that money cannot purchase.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I mean, I remember as an attorney, the reward, I look back in that season, the reward came when you exceeded your billing budget. So, you saw your salary go up, but it did rather leave you with a sense of, gosh, I'm only really as good as last year's numbers. And I know in one sense in the marketplace, candidly, there has to be some reality there. I mean, I get that, but actually, when you're building a culture of honor that's actually really seeking to honor the individual, and however you do that, I think it creates a much stronger sense of loyalty to the company and a sense of an appropriate sense of security. This is a place that actually I feel valued and heard, I think that creates further kind of entrepreneurial thinking across the board. And I think that's a stronger incentivizer. I mean, I was really grateful for my big pay rises, and I can remember them at like 26 suddenly getting this huge bump. But I then remember going into the next year thinking, oh my gosh, I got to do that all over again. And actually, if I look back, occasionally we'd have some dinner or something, and if they'd done something like call someone up and say, hey, this person really settled this case, blah, 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 they get the, I don't know, golden pen, or I don't know, whatever it is, the golden biro, I don't know, whatever, something that actually would have created a different kind of culture. It was less clinical. Money can sometimes just feel a bit clinical. Anyway, it's good. I'm not saying don't reward, but you understand what I'm saying.
I think it's a different kind. I think it's a both and, as it often is.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not either or. I think
you're
right. Like, you were grateful for the pay increases, but a little recognition in front of the team as well would have.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, it was both and. It was both and. I'm just saying, it is both and. It is both and.
Yeah, I agree. So you've mentioned multiple times the term putting vision into action. That's something that I actually have heard you say that I've adopted into my own vocabulary because I rather like it. And I think that's really the place where strategy operates.
Yeah.
So you are, again, unique in the sense of, I've seen a lot of leaders who have beautiful strategic plans and they never see the light of day. They're gorgeous. They go on a wall or in a file somewhere, and somebody eventually asks, well, where is your strategic plan? And the person tries to look for it and it looks beautiful. And then someone asks, well, where are you at on these items? And no one can remember.
Yeah.
And then you have the opposite, which is, tyranny of the urgent, going to work on what's most important.
Oh yeah,
in front of you all the time.
Absolutely.
Talk about balancing in your role.
Yeah.
In leading a group of 175 others, in kind of that, the yin and the yang of casting vision continuously and not giving up on that, and building a good execution system.
Okay. Well, I think there's some various pieces to that. I mean, I think I'll begin by saying that once you cast the vision, I think what you then have to do is be very disciplined and kind of annualize, or, semi-annualize if you want, some kind of review, some kind of formal review process where, again, you come together with your senior leadership team, a wider leadership team, and the company, and say, okay, where are we? How, and actually there needs to be a sense of accountability in that. I mean, for us, I have 175 leaders, but they're responsible for multiple communities. So, the diocese has an overall strategic, there's a vision, missions, and so forth, but they then dovetail under that. So one of the things that we do is actually bring our guys together once a year. I mean, you're a big part of this, and they have a 2-day opportunity to, work with coaches, think it through. They bring their leadership teams and they review their strategy. They literally go home with a piece of paper with a plan on it that says, this is what we want to accomplish in fulfilling the vision. Here's the goal. Here's what success looks like. Here's who's going to do it. Here's what's going to cost us. Here are the resources that we need. I mean, it's really simple. And in terms of it being filed away, I am actually really old school here. But I actually send them home with an enormous piece of paper, which I know sounds dumb, but they know that I expect to see that piece of paper in their office when I go and visit. I want to see it up on the wall. Mm-hmm. And it actually literally being up there, I think, is a really constant rate. It's too easy for things just to get lost on the bar, with all the tiny, and I want it up on the wall. I want it seen. And I think also as you're going through the year, you can, and I'm saying this to them, you can pivot. You can say, okay, we really thought back in January that was the way to go, but we've just learned a couple of things, or something has changed in the marketplace, or, for us in the culture, or whatever it is. We need to pivot a little bit here, and you can make those adjustments, but everybody sees it. The other thing I think is about building a culture where, and again, this isn't an expression I came up with, but I don't remember where I heard it, but it's always stayed with me, is a permission to fail forward. And what I mean by that is, I mean, I say to our guys, look, unless it's illegal, heretical, or immoral, if you feel it could actually drive the vision forward, give it a go, So, I mean, you don't want the kind of risk taking that could bring the company down, or the integrity or the reputation of the company. Now, that's not the kind of risk I'm talking about, but there is a permission to actually try things and to work it out. And I think these moments of review are where we say, okay, did this serve us? And I used to spend a long time sitting with leaders, and I still do this now, and our coaches are now doing now, saying, okay, so you tried that, and actually maybe it didn't work quite as well as you'd hoped, but what did work, and why do you think it didn't work? And then you just kind of take all that learning and you pour it into the next kind of strategic move. So you're kind of building on that. And again, I think I am a great believer in recognizing that there's a level of expertise at the grassroots level that, I mean, any CEO, they have their own responsibility, and you can't expect somebody who's working in here. I mean, okay, let's make it a flat place, but someone who's, you got your CEO in the middle, you got someone out here. You can't, the CEO's got their own area of responsibility. You can't expect someone out here to understand all the minutiae of just kind of how this is all fitting together. Mm-hmm. But in their area, they have an expertise. I mean, and there are just so many stories, aren't there, of somebody saying, well, actually, if we only actually put one flame end on a matchstick, we're going to save the company $1 billion, whatever it is, all those kinds of stories. But I think they're real. I definitely feel that in my kind of industry. My guys are the local experts.
Yeah.
So I think it's really allowing that. And again, I think that's celebrating it, making a space for it. But I think regular review, acknowledging that it's okay to fail forward. I think a sense of accountability to one another as well is good. And I think the annual review really helps that, because it's like, okay, at the end of this kind of strategy building process, they present a plan to their colleagues. They say, this is what we're going to do in our little part of the field. This is what we're set to. The first thing they do when they come back is hold up the plan and say, and this is how we did. And I have found in my area that there's nothing like prayer and peer pressure to kind of get people motivated. So I think that's a really compelling thing. I mean, I know I've got people, that they'll tell me, it's like, oh my gosh, we've got the, missional planning, the strategy thing coming up. I got to really, let's sit down and, make sure we got some wins here. And that drives out, I think, the tyranny of the urgent. I think that sense of accountability, mutual accountability.
Yeah. And we have ongoing coaching sessions throughout the year. And then, like the pivots that you talk about, I think are great, because a lot of times, you sit in a room and you look and you'll have the right general idea, but the tactics might not be right.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the tactics need to shift. And I think giving the strategic plan is a great framework, but inside of the framework, a lot can happen. And there's a lot of mobility and things that take place that you learn about that you might need to call it on.
And actually, you've reminded me, I think one of the best kinds of story, when you're painting a picture of something, hey, look what happened over here, this is a great place of success. I think the best kinds of story generally begin with, hey, we tried this, it stank. It just didn't work like we hoped. But what we learned from that was this, and then we did that, and whoa, look what happened. And I think everybody can relate to that. I think frankly, I think that's a much more motivating story, because
it goes with the whole idea of you talking about the goal is not perfection. And that's a huge misconception.
Yeah.
Perfection is unattainable, and it's exhausting, and it's depleting energy, and it's anxiety inducing.
Yeah.
What actually promotes growth is progress, compounding upon itself.
Yeah.
For better results. So
I think
that goes exactly with what you're saying, in the sense of learning. Is there's growth that happens there, and we either, I think it was John Wooden or somebody like that, he said we either learn or we win.
Yes.
Or fail, like we learn or we win.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
That's exactly right.
I do think that's exactly right. I do think that's exactly right. And again, I think, these are strange times. There's a lot of kind of global and national uncertainty. You can't give people cast iron. There's no such thing as a job for life anymore. But I'm pretty sure it must be the same for pretty any market. You want to build a team that actually feels an appropriate sense of security. And I think,
yeah,
giving, again, honoring hey, we tried this, it didn't work, but this really did, and making that space for entrepreneurialism. It's like, it's okay for me to try. I'm not going to get fired because I tried something and it didn't go quite as well as we hoped, but we learned a ton, and then we did this, and whoa, look at the results. Again, illegal, heretical, immoral, that's kind of what it is in my industry. I guess in the marketplace, you don't want some kind of idea that could potentially ruin the integrity of the company. That's not the kind of risk you're looking at. But in a safer place, I think allowing that kind of grassroots innovation to be celebrated, to bubble up, give it a place, communicate, just again, the buy-in. I mean, everybody's now in that vision moving forward.
Yeah. And that it may start here.
Yeah.
But as you bring people into that fold,
that's exactly it.
The gets more broad.
That's exactly it. And actually, with your hands like that, I would say that the sides here on my hands represent, if you like, the boundary lines.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like, we're not gonna go into criminality here. We're not gonna get fraudulent here. We're not gonna preach heresy or whatever it is. Here are our values. I think these actually do represent the values, really. Yeah. So within those values, moving this direction, there's all this space to be really creative,
exactly,
and make a difference.
So you're a big believer in coaching for your team. You're a big believer in coaching for yourself.
Yes.
Talk for just a minute or two about what are some of the benefits that you've realized from coaching.
Oh gosh, there's so many. I think there's two that immediately come to mind, although I could talk about this for a long time. But just to say that the first two that come to mind is, one, I think leadership is hard. I think anybody who says it isn't probably isn't leading. I think it's a hard science. I think there is tremendous gifting out there. There are people with tremendous skills, but even with those tremendous skills and gifting and experience, it's still hard. Mm-hmm. So I think coaching provides that safe place to say, this is really hard. What the heck do I do with this? Yeah. And I think what I really like about you, Josh, is that there's an empathetic kind of edge. It's like, yeah, that's tough. I think that makes a safe place to be super honest about, and where could I have done better there? So I think it works because it provides this kind of safe place where you can be honest about wins and things that you don't feel are going so well, and kind of look at, and it should be a safe place.
It is. Leadership is lonely to some. It's not only is it hard, it can be very lonely because
it is.
There are a lot of things that you're dealing with and other organizational heads are dealing with that they can't go talk to a vice president or one of the other 175 leaders who are in your care.
No, exactly.
So a coach provides a place where you can actually let your hair down.
Absolutely. And I think in leadership quite often, you just can't always give. It wouldn't be appropriate to give all the information. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be appropriately transparent, but transparency doesn't mean that you kind of put everything out there. You can't. And so often I think leaders end up looking like idiots because they can't actually. So, and frankly, even if you did, people would say, well, I don't believe it. It's just, it goes round and round. We know as a leader, what you're dealing with, what the issues are. And so I think that generates a sense of loneliness and isolation. So a coach becomes a really good friend, a wise friend, kind of a wise older brother or sister, that's saying, well, and I think in that there's a place to really kind of sit down and process and see where you might pivot and be creative again. So I think that's got the kind of first box. But the second box, I think, is that there's the whole kind of area of building muscle on good habits, just generally good habits that are going to, outside of the whatever the current issues are that you're kind of wrestling with, and the coach can help you kind of talk through that. But what are the habits that you can put into practice that are going to actually make you lead as a non-anxious presence, or as an encourager, as someone that truly is leading to their fullness? And I think building a coach being able to kind of pull back and say, for example, okay, what does your calendar look like? Are you building enough time here? I mean, and I think, one of the leadership principles we have here, it's pretty holistic. I want to know, are my guys getting enough time with their families? What is the state of their own kind of spiritual life? Because honestly, if those two things go wrong, then they are not going to be able to lead well the communities that they've been given responsibility for. So, and I can see how that would translate in any other kind of marketplace. That's not just for the church. So intentionally, there is a kind of holistic kind of, those habits are holistic. Are you taking the vacation that you should? Are you spending enough time with your kids even? I think
healthy leaders build healthy organizations.
Yeah, they
There's
do.
no question about it. And James Clear wrote a great book called Atomic Habits, and in it he says that we rise and fall to the level of our habits. It's not, at the end of the day, where energy, despite whatever we want to think, is finite. And so we think we can just hunker down and grind it out a little more, when in reality it's our habits that sustain us in good times and in bad, and we rise and fall to those levels of systems that we have. And so I think you're right. I think coaching has to do with providing tools like the one you just mentioned, and accountability for that, right? That safe place where you can talk about, say, hey, that's not going well right now. Like, okay, what can we do to get that back in the right
and
place?
I think it's a really serious issue. I can't tell you how many leaders, really good leaders I've spoken to, who would say, because I think, whether you profess a faith or not, I think a Protestant work ethic has soaked its way into the kind of American psyche. So I think most leaders work extraordinarily hard and long hours. And when that gets out of balance, I can't tell you how many leaders I have spoken to who have said it basically took something like cancer to kind of cause me to kind of make the adjustments that I needed to. And now I'm working much more efficiently, with a lot more joy, and much more fruitfully. But let's not let it get to cancer. Let's build in those habits now. And also in terms of, the only thing, if we're working constantly at a straight line, my understanding, the only thing that works at a straight line is the kind of that death thing in a hospital. Where you don't want that. I think we are made to kind of rest. It's kind of built into us, and we need space to be able to be creative. I often find some of the best ideas I get are in the shower, and I honestly think that's maybe one of the few places where I just shut up long enough to actually think properly. I'm trying to build in other areas, but I do think it's often in the downtime. It could be on the golf course, on a walk or something, that you go, that's it. And so that's not cheating. I actually think that's good leadership, and taking care of yourself so you can take care of others in a healthy way is not cheating. That is, I think, strong leadership.
Excellent. Well, we can't end on a better word than that. Drew Williams is the Bishop of the Anglican Diocese in New England, part of the Anglican Church in North America. So grateful for your time today. Thanks so much for the insights that you've shared here. You can give our podcast a like on any of the platforms that you're listening in on now. Tune in next week for another episode. Thanks so much for listening to High Impact, a podcast for leaders.